We're live.
Hi, everyone. I'm Margaret Schaus.
Hello, I'm Brandon Testers. Welcome to the This Is Not Therapy Hour. Margaret and I are both licensed therapists, but this is not therapy for very, very many reasons. Turning off the keep warm function on my kettle so it doesn't just keep making noise. This is just an open conversation. Margaret and I are here talking with one another and with you all. We're doing our best to make our guesses about who you are and what you're interested in and how we're coming across to you and how we're impacting you. For those of you who are willing and able to participate in the chat, we appreciate that because it gives us more information on which to base those guesses about who you are and how we're impacting you. Please don't hold back if you want to jump in. That can be questions, it can be anything, but certainly don't worry about whether or not what you're saying is on topic of what we're already talking about. We get to talk to each other a lot, which is wonderful, but we do this to be with you all, not with one another specifically. We can talk about whatever we want at other times. We're trying our best to talk about what we think is interesting to you. If it's something else on your mind, tell us. We'll go where we go. We work with a private therapy practice called Effective Artistry. Our office is located in Northbrook, Illinois. We do individual, couples, family, and group therapy with people in the state of Illinois and Wisconsin. States of Illinois and Wisconsin.
You also didn't mention about how we have different streaming platforms. So if you're commenting on one, you won't see it. Like if you're commenting from Twitch, you won't see it on another streaming thing. So we do our best to read the comments aloud so everyone kind of can join in on the conversation and know what we are all talking about.
Yeah.
That's it.
Cool. All right. Good to see you.
How are you? I'm good. I don't know why I feel the need to say this. I'm not sick. I have cough drops here. I don't know. I don't want people to think I was sick. It's just every year when the heat turns on in my house and I'm not used to it, I get a sore throat. So that's that. Anyways, I'm doing good.
And we got a reminder there from Fritz about coaching, which yes, we also work with coaches who can work with people all over the world via the internet. All of the coaches that work with us are executive functioning coaches, but they each have their own specialties in addition to that, parenting, business, and creativity, arts.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, sorry. So you just start to cough when the weather changes?
No, I just have a sore throat.
Oh.
Just gets really dry. I thought I thought I was sick yesterday, but I realized it was just the heat going on, and then my humidifier has been like broken for 2 weeks. Realized it wasn't even working, so kind of new one of those. But no, I'm feeling good. Normally I don't like the cold, but I don't know. This year I like really enjoy it for some reason. I think I was saying that last time. Normally I'm very much like a warm weather person, but I don't know. I love the burst of cold air. I don't know. And I was one of those crazy people this past weekend that not later on in the afternoon, but like when the winter storm hit for us, it was like a big winter storm, and I was doing errands in the day, and my fiance was like, "Why are you driving out in this?" And I'm like, "It's just so nice." And I think what I realized was, realizing this now, was I always lived my life so fast paced. Like go, I gotta go here, I gotta go there. And like, I don't know, driving, like normally I would be very annoyed driving 8 miles an hour to some place that's like 10 minutes away, but I just loved it. Like I loved it was nice and slow and it was relaxing. It took me like 2 hours to go to like 2 places and I was just loving it, which is very strange, but
I mean, it doesn't sound strange to me.
I guess it's just strange to me because I was that person that was just so upset, just like, come on, let's go. And like never had a lot of road rage until the winter time, but it was just so nice and slow and relaxing.
Good, I'm glad.
But how was your vacation, or vacation as in you went back home?
No, right? Actually, we visited some friends in Des Moines and it was lovely. Yes, I was out of the office last Wednesday, Thursday, Friday.
I always just assume you're going home when you're out of the office every time.
No, I am soon going to be taking a quick weekend trip to Utah in a couple weeks. But yeah, no, it was nice. We just got back in last night, and getting in on the Sunday night, like before getting back into the swing of things, is always a little tricky, especially with kids involved. Mm-hmm. But it was wonderful. The friends that we were visiting with are just the loveliest people that I enjoy being with them so much. And they just had their second child was just born just under 3 months ago. So That was my first time meeting him.
Mm-hmm.
Teddy. He's my
Oh.
little namesake. His name is Edwin James. His first name's Edwin. His middle name is James. And I have two middle names, and they're
Yeah.
James and Edwin. So.
Oh, that's so cute.
But yeah, lovely. And yes, Northbrook is a suburb of Chicago. We're on the North Shore of Chicago, and so it got real cold and snowed a bunch over the weekend. So it's very winter wonderland outside right now. And we had my oldest son Miles used to play flag football, and really like connected with a bunch of the people on his team. And I mean, we knew a bunch of them from other things too. And he hasn't done it in a while, like a little over a year, but we still, like, he's in a fantasy football league with those guys. And they do a weekly or an annual turkey bowl, turkey bowl.
Yeah, I do.
So, and the guy who runs it is great. I mean, he's an MBA. He's very like driven and organized guy, and he sets up this whole thing. So Wednesday morning, Miles and I went and played in that turkey bowl, just played some football, and that was a lot of fun. He got the MVP of the whole thing, which
God.
When I grew up, the turkey bowls that I did growing up were very informal. Like, I mean, the one I remember the most was just not even planned in advance, just one Thanksgiving. It was on Thanksgiving morning. My dad was like, let's go. We just like went and knocked on people's doors and was like, hey, we're going to play football in the park. If you want to come join us.
I miss those days.
Yeah.
Knocking on people's doors.
And we ended up having like a bunch of people show up. It was a lot of fun, but very informal, whatever. And not like huge. Where this is like, I mean, he ordered like hats and shirts for people.
Oh my gosh.
And people brought breakfast. And there were probably 50 kids-ish. Well, 40 to 50 kids. So it was a big thing. And Miles, my son, they gave him this MVP trophy at the end. So that was very exciting for him. But that, in order to be in town for that, we didn't leave until Wednesday, like afternoon, which usually we would go earlier than that. That's why we got it back in last night.
Oh, gotcha. That sounds fun. I don't know why this made me think of this, but just talking about Thanksgiving and winter wonderland and all of that, like, I feel like normally they say like the holiday times are supposed to be like really stressful and really go, but like, and I used to feel like that, but this year I feel like I'm just enjoying it more, I guess, and just being in like the present moment. I guess I wanted to know, like, what are your thoughts on like the holidays and like the stress and like the buildup of all of that? Also, there's a comment though. I don't want to. Can Grandpa's play in that turkey bowl? Yes.
I'm sure that can be arranged. Yes.
Is there a way to Zoom?
Yeah, I can zoom it in a bit.
Chat?
Make it easier to read.
I realized I need to wear my glasses that I don't wear, and I need him to. Thank you. Make the font bigger. Thanks.
Holidays. Yeah. Holidays certainly can be stressful. Obviously, I don't know. I think it's a lot of things. And I do think that there's something also to experiences matching expectations. Like the more that you expect it to be stressful, the more likely it is to be stressful. And I don't mean that in some like mystical way. That's a pretty clear experience that people have. Like any of us who have an evening where it's like, oh, tomorrow I got a lot to do. I got to be up early. Like I really need to get good rest tonight. If we think of it as like tomorrow's a big high stakes day, that makes it harder for us to sleep and rest in advance. And so it does end up making tomorrow be more stressful. I think a lot of that has to do with family, like the holidays. When we say the holidays, generally the time period that's being referred to is like in the United States is like Thanksgiving through New Year's.
Yeah.
And for the majority of people in the U.S., Christmas is the other big one in there, but not everybody celebrates Christmas. But there are a bunch of other holidays in there, Hanukkah and Kwanzaa.
Yeah.
I don't know. I do think a lot of it has to do with family. That there are many people for whom interacting with what in therapy we refer to as the family of origin, the people with whom you grew up, the people who raised you and the people with whom you were raised as your family of origin. That in our culture, there's a lot of people who don't interact with their family of origin regularly.
Right.
In fact, I mean, I don't have numbers on this, but I would say that it seems to me that it's more common for people to not like interact with for adults to not interact with their parents on a daily basis.
It's
than otherwise.
It's not.
Yeah, I think I would say that I think more than half of the people in the U.S. don't talk to their parents on a daily or every other daily basis kind of thing. Not to say that more than half the people are like low contact or no contact with their parents, but it's a fairly typical thing to be like, yeah, we talk, but it's not like, I don't talk to them every day or whatever. And that can make for some, difficult things. Children grow up and they become different from their siblings, and then you get everybody back together and all this stuff happens.
Yeah. As you were saying that, I realized another two things I want to say. One thing related to that was, and I don't know if you all experience this, but I do, is that like I do talk to most of the people now. My Christmas is pretty small now, so I do interact with like my sisters and my parents a lot. But I think when we are all together, we almost revert back to like our dynamics as children. Like I'm the youngest in the family, so when I get around with all my family, it's like I'm kind of like I feel more shut out, and then I start to act as though like I'm like that 10-year-old girl that like is meek and doesn't talk and is just trying to make everyone happy. And like I don't know, I feel like reverting back to like how you were when you were younger. Like in me, like I'm a 30-year-old adult woman, and I go there and I'm acting like a child and like still sitting at the kids table, which I do choose now because it is more fun and you can color and stuff. But I think I almost like do that to myself too, or something I thought of.
Sure. And before anything else, I'll say that
call your mama.
I didn't need to call my mom. I'll say that I saw someone make a comment one time, like in jest, in like online neurodiversity circles or neurodivergent circles, that always stuck with me. The joke they made was like, you're autistic if when you were a kid you wanted to always hang out with the grown-ups at parties, and now that you're a grown-up you always want to hang out with the kids at parties.
Calling me out. Yep.
So there's something to that. But yeah, even the way you're describing it, right, like we culturally tend to talk about it this way, about like reverting or like going back to what we were like as kids or whatever, when really probably the more accurate way to talk about it is like that's the dynamics that happen when that group of people is together,
right.
And just that group of people used to be together a lot when you were young, and now you aren't together that often. So more than you reverting to you being a younger version of yourself, it's just that's the dynamics that play out when that's the group of people that's together.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So your experience of it is mostly when you were a kid, and you then think of it as like when you were a child. But who knows?
What was the other thing? Kind of plays into that was, I don't know, at least for my family and how I've seen things is whenever there's, because I mean Christmas, I think it's normally the same thing. Like normally the person has it, like my cousin always has it at their house. We do dinner at a certain time. We do this at a certain time. So whenever there's a shift, even if it's small, it like freaks everyone out. Like my cousin just had a baby, so they are not hosting Christmas this year. My mom and I are. And I'm so excited for it. I'm already planning everything. And my mom is just freaking out. And I'm like, nothing has changed besides the location. And I don't know, I think I'm connecting this to what we were just talking about, like not reverting back, but just going back to those dynamics is like, I don't want to change anything. Because I feel like any change, I don't know if other people experience this in their family, but in my family is like, people don't know how to handle it. So I just stay how I used to be, 10-year-old Margaret. And also just with those other changes, like it just makes, I think people are used to like wanting some type of routine or wanting some similarity when it's like the crazy holiday times. And when that's shifted, it like makes a big thing.
I think, to me, I think it's more useful to think of these, again, I'm talking about what's useful, never like what's accurate, because I think the way you're describing it is perfectly accurate. There's just lots of accurate ways to describe it. So to me, the way I think is most useful is to think of these dynamics as like emergent. They just show up. Not that they're like carried over from prior. It's just, if we take any two random people and put them in a room together, they'll interact in some kind of a way. And if we take those two people and separate them for 10 years and then put them back in a room together, they'll most likely interact to some extent in a similar way, because while they've changed over 10 years, like there's overlying tendencies and whatever. And that doesn't require that it's like anybody making any conscious decision to do that. It's just, we respond to the context, the environment, stimuli and response and whatever. So put someone with the same group of people and they're probably going to act similarly to how they acted with that group of people the last time they interacted.
Right.
I do think that change thing, that's one of those things that comes up a lot in talking about earlier when I said sometimes our experience meets our expectations.
Mhm.
That comes up a lot when people will say things like, I don't do well with change, or I don't like change. Because that's completely arbitrary. What you decide is change or not.
Mhm.
Right? Like literally, I know this is like overly specific and pedantic, but every moment is different than the prior moment. And I get it that like, no, we mean big changes or whatever. But even then, like some big changes we count as a change and some big changes we don't. And even two different people that are like, I struggle with change. One of those people means like, as one of the specific things they're referring to, it's like, oh, if I don't have my usual breakfast, I really struggle. And the other one would be like, oh no, breakfast I don't care about. But like if I don't have my usual like Lucky Wednesday scarf or whatever. So a lot of that is just needless justification. It's just, I don't like this thing. And then we're like, well, why?
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, because I don't like change. But you can say that about anything.
Right.
And so it just blocks us from getting at the more specific. Like there's something more specific about what your mom doesn't like than just that it's different than it was before. That's just the easy explanation to give. And then we look at that stuff. And it's not that it's good or bad. It's just being more aware, you know?
Yeah.
There's a, go ahead.
No. Could the ow in autistic and authentic be considered the same root?
Yeah, the AU. So I don't know, actually. I do know that in autistic, the root is AUTO, auto, meaning self. I don't know. That could be this. I don't know the roots of authentic. And it's possible that auto is part of the root in authentic. But I don't know. But yeah, it's not AU, it's AUTO. Autism is named autism in the same way that like feminism or whatever, you know, like it's a focus on it's a belief system or a focus on whatever around. And autism is the self. So it was not that that's what it is, but that's how it was named. That the word autism was coined as a way of saying like people who are autistic are kind of in their own world. They're disconnected from other people. Kind of goes in line with the way that people generally think of autistic people as having reduced or a complete lack of empathy, or some kind of social or communication deficit, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So that's the root in autism, is like a person by themselves in their own world, you know, not as reachable or connected to others around.
Where did that even stem from?
That particular name?
No, I'm sorry. Like them. I guess I'm holding on to like them not having empathy. That would drive me nuts.
Yeah, well, that's a explanation that comes out of the deficit model. So here's the thing. We can start with like first principles, meaning like, let's start with just what is observed or experienced, the phenomenon. And then people try to come up with explanations for why it is that way, and they go different directions. So here's the thing that happens is people miscommunicate, right? Like all people miscommunicate. You send me signals that I don't pick up on, or that I interpret you as saying something differently than what you're really saying, and vice versa. That happens. Does it happen more for some people than for others? Hard to measure, but it's fine to say yes or no. It doesn't matter. Certainly, though, in practical terms, like we have observed patterns of like a person who is miscommunicating in certain contexts or at certain frequency, that it's more noticeable or causes more problems for that person than like for other people around them.
Okay. How are you connecting this to empathy?
Well, so we then want to explain that. So the deficit model starts with the explanation that the reason that this person is misunderstanding or missing cues or miscommunicating with other people more than others is because they are falling short in something. You know, that it's the deficit model is a couple of things. A, that it would be better for them to do it differently. You know, it would be better if they were miscommunicating less frequently or in different ways. And B, that the only reason that they're not is because there is some deficiency in the individual. There's something that's lacking, that if they had more of it, or if they had it, then the problem wouldn't exist. And so empathy is one of those explanations. It's like, oh, well, maybe they're miscommunicating or misreading or whatever because they don't have as much of an ability to empathize with other humans. Go ahead.
No, I know I'm making that face. Like I get it, but like I feel like what do they mean by empathy? I feel like miscommunication has nothing to do with empathizing with other people.
Well, that's
I'm just getting upset.
yeah, sure.
I guess that's what you're reading my face.
Well, and I'll say this comes much later in like the explanation of all this, but something that's worth noting is that people will often talk about what's called the double empathy problem, which is more accurate, certainly, meaning that like, well, if I'm not understanding the way that you're communicating and you say that that is the result of some lack of empathy on my part, then doesn't that mean that you not understanding how I'm communicating also means that you have a lack of
Right.
empathy on your part? And so that's something that is talked about among like autistic advocates and activists, the double empathy problem. Like if there is some lack of empathy that's causing misunderstanding, it's causing it on both sides.
Right.
And that I think is much more useful and much closer to the truth.
Yeah.
Of that, like any given miscommunication has so much going on. But anyway, yes, what do we mean by empathy is one of those things that like people use that word in all different kinds of ways. But generally, in this case, if you break it down to like, to some extent, perspective taking, like the ability to put yourself in the other person's shoes and see things from their perspective, to like that influences interpretation. How I interpret you is partly based on like what I think you are trying to accomplish.
Right.
So if I'm not able to think about what you're trying to accomplish or what your experience is as much, then my interpretation is less likely to be accurate to what you're trying to do. I think you're probably talking about empathy as in just like feeling what the other person's feeling.
At first I was talking about the in your own person shoes things, but then as you were saying that, I was like, but that's like impossible.
For anyone to do that?
Yeah, like to really know.
I mean, for sure,
you know what I mean?
But that, you can get closer and further from,
Yeah, but I guess then no all-encompassing, like you said the emotions. What did you say?
Yeah, sometimes when we talk about empathy, what we mean is like, you're sad and I'm sad because I'm feeling your sadness, that's empathy, especially when we're talking about people being empathic or people being empaths. We're talking about like being affected on some like non-intellectual level of consciousness, which also theoretically obviously would filter or would affect communication as well. Like, if I'm sad and I say something and then I'm happy and I say the same thing, I likely mean different things in the two different ways, and knowing which one I am, or even if you don't know, just being in that same state with me makes it more likely that you'll interpret it the way that I mean it. But yeah, no, the whole concept is flawed because it's not a deficit. It happens. It is true that people misunderstand and miscommunicate. It's even true, at least in theory, again, hard to actually measure, but no one, not me or anybody, is arguing the idea that some people experience miscommunications at a rate or an intensity or, like that is worse in some way than the average or whatever. The explanations for that, though, to say that that's a result of a lack of some characteristic in the person, about 20, maybe 30-ish years ago, there was a lot of research being done into what are called mirror neurons. Do you remember any of this from grad school?
No, I don't think they taught us that.
They usually get a little chapter in psychology textbooks, in large part because, like, I don't want to speak out of turn. I was going to say because they were discovered, but I don't think it's discovered. I think it's, in the like mid 90s is when, for whatever reason, people became more aware of like, oh, there are these special neurons in your brain called mirror neurons. They seem to behave differently than others in some way, and we're not exactly sure what they do and why and whatever.
That's really vague. Okay.
And so from there, then is like a lot of exploration and experimentation and trying to like figure that stuff out.
I still don't understand what you mean by mirror neurons.
Literally, of all the neurons in your brain,
yeah,
like some of those are different than others. I couldn't tell you the specific ways in which they're different.
So why do they call them mirror
neurons? MIRR.
No, I know, but
again, I might be inaccurate on this, so feel free to anyone to Google and double check me here. But because of some observation of them activating in response to observing other humans,
okay,
that you're like, your brain is in some way mirroring, what you're observing someone else do. And I don't know where things stand. My experience of this which again, just my experience, is that I heard people talking about it a lot, and now I don't hear people talking about it ever. So I wonder if it's one of those things that everyone was very excited about, and then some conclusions were reached, and now people are like, yeah, I guess it's not as big a deal as we thought. But I do vaguely remember people looking into whether there was a correlation with having fewer mirror neurons and being autistic and stuff like that.
Interesting.
Yeah, for a long time, well, I guess still probably one of the preeminent thinkers in the world, like most famous and well-regarded experts on autism. His name is Simon Baron Cohen.
Mm.
He is related to Sacha Baron Cohen.
Oh.
They're cousins. And that empathy, the lack of empathy, is one of his theories about what's going on. Because of course, again, here's what no one is arguing, is that we observe people, whether they're children, but frequently, or at least primarily, we notice these patterns in children in our culture. We pay more attention to them, that behave in certain ways, match certain characteristics or experiences and certain patterns that we label as autistic. No one's arguing that, right? That there are some kids who are whatever trait you want to talk about, nonverbal or intermittently verbal, or have emotional meltdowns, or whatever. All these things, whatever combination. And certainly we are, because of the nature of how attention works, we are going to notice stuff like that when it's a problem.
Right.
At least at first, especially at first, right? That we assume that everything is the same as what we already know until and unless we have reason to believe otherwise. So you assume that your child is the same as every other child, except for the specific ways in which you know that they're different, and so on. And so when we, like, the way that the whole system is structured, this isn't a criticism of the system, it's just the nature of how it works, is that, like, yes, when problems are happening, when something's going on, I'm having a hard time communicating with them, or they're responding in a certain way to things that are causing issues or whatever, that's when we start the process of, like, is there something going on here? Let's track, like, what's happening with other kids. Are there similarities? And so that's happening, certainly. Of course, we could categorize people in all kinds of ways, but this is one that we do. And then, of course, we speculate because we're noticing it when it's a problem. We're like, well, we want to change it. We want to make it so that those problems don't happen. I don't think... A
problem for them or the problem for the kid?
Well, I mean, that's obviously a relevant discussion, but for this, we can say, again, nobody is making the argument that, like, nothing we associate with autism is problematic in any way, or that, like, even any person who is identified or identifies as autistic would also say that, like, yes, there are things about my experience that I wish they were different than they are, things that I associate with being autistic or whatever. Problems just meaning, like, things that are different than we would want them to be. And we're going to leave aside the discussion right now of how much of that is, like, the people, especially adults, around a child, and things are happening in ways that they don't like.
Yeah.
And how much of it is about things happening for the individual in ways that they don't like.
Okay.
Because certainly there's a lot of overlap in that, right? Like, no one would argue that a child having an emotional meltdown, like, obviously that is problematic, inconvenient, undesirable for the adults around them, but nobody would argue that the kid likes it.
Right.
You know, like, nobody likes being so upset that you're crying and whatever. So certainly there are things that, like, now, whether they're useful or whether they make sense is different from whether they are pleasant or unpleasant. And especially important, I think, is that there are all kinds of things that are useful in a general sense, but then get utilized in a particular instance in a way that isn't useful.
Okay. Can you give me an example?
So, like, sensitivities is an example, right? That if I pick up more data, auditory data, auditory sensitivity is the one we talk about the most culturally. If I pick up more auditory data than other people, obviously there are ways in which that, at least theoretically, is useful or could be useful. The ways in which I hear music, or the ways in which I navigate my environment and pick up data. Now, we're not likely to notice that, right? Like, if you have a 6-year-old kid who picks up more detail in listening to a song than other people do, you're not likely to have any way of even knowing about that. At most, it'd be like, wow, they really like music or whatever. No one's but when there's a loud noise and then they're crying to a much greater degree than anybody else is around them, then you're likely to be like, well, what the hell's going on
Right.
here?
Okay, that makes sense.
So that doesn't mean that whatever that is that's making it so a person is responding, picking up on, and prioritizing that data, doesn't mean it's never useful. In fact, at least in theory, it would have to be useful the vast majority of the time. But still, there are certain instances where it's like, oh yeah, no, this is no good.
Right.
Right. Like another much simpler and more general thing is like helping people is good, right? And yet we also are all aware that like, and if, there are certainly contexts in which trying to give that person everything that they want and makes them happy is not working out for you or them or anything.
Right.
Anyway, so then there's the speculation, because people go at it as like, well, how do we make this better? Which makes sense. How do we fix the problem? Makes sense. And then our culture is very focused generally on, in order to fix a problem, we have to understand why it's happening the way that it is.
Right.
Which isn't true, but it's not unhelpful. The more you understand why something happens the way that it does, the easier it is for you to come up with ideas of how to change it. But yeah, so everybody speculates.
Yeah.
And because, again, we're noticing it when it's a problem, and especially with autism, because we're noticing it at a very young age. One of the diagnostic criteria for autism spectrum disorder is that the symptoms of autism have to have been present prior to the age of 3.
I guess I don't know what I'm trying to say. I feel like it's because I have people in my family that got diagnosed with autism and like actually diagnosed, and there weren't signs of them before the age of 3.
Well, how
reported.
people do diagnosis, the process of diagnosing disorders is very arbitrary.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean random or ineffectual. It just means it's decided by the diagnostician, and 2 different people can disagree. There's no like empirical tests to use. And that includes, yes, that people often don't utilize all of the diagnostic criteria. There's good versions of that, or versions of that you and I would both approve of too, where like if somebody's 40 and trying to get diagnosed for whatever reason, good for a diagnostician to be like, okay, I guess, we don't need to track down your parents and get information about what you were like before the age of 3.
Or I feel like, I don't know, I feel like I know you're saying like that's not always used for like every person, like every diagnosis of it, but I feel like how could that even, like if someone's 40 years old and they do contact their parents or whatever, how do we even know that that's accurate?
Yeah, no, this comes up, and this is like an actual concern that's happened with clients where sometimes parents will disagree with their children, especially adult children. Like there are times that adult children believe that they're autistic and are going through a diagnostic process, and the parents disagree, and then they end up with a diagnostician who requires talking to the parents, and the parents are like, nope, that didn't, whatever. It's all a mess. This is one of the reasons that I generally don't recommend for adults to try to get diagnosed. It's not usually beneficial to an adult. I mean, very rare circumstances where an official diagnosis is impactful. But for the most part, it's just because people have a misconception about autism as though it is a biological condition and they want to know if they have it or don't. And that's not how it works.
I feel like though another thing though too, like for adults, is that whether the test is accurate or not, I feel like if they identify as being autistic and no one in their family, no one in their friends think that, and they get a diagnosis that says it, I feel like whether that's true or not, they can at least like, here's the proof. Like
Right. And
it's helpful in that regard.
Again, understandable, although I'm, again, talking in generalities. And generally speaking, if a person is in a situation in which like the people around them are disagreeing with them about how they view themselves and whether they think, autism is an applicable identifier, and the nature of those interactions or relationships are such that like the person's own word doesn't carry weight, but an official like diagnosis from a medical practitioner would, like then things are set up in such a way where it's not going to make that much of a difference anyway, and it's not very likely to happen.
Yeah.
Like without the support of the people around you. Mostly we're talking about like teenagers and college students, like young 20s, people who are, if it's this important to prove to your parents and other people that you are autistic, and a medical diagnosis will work, but your own experience doesn't.
Yeah.
For the most part, we're talking about people who other people around them have a lot of control or power or influence on their life, whether that's because they're paying for things or whatever.
Right.
And in those cases, like getting a diagnosis is going to be difficult without the support of the people who are paying for everything
Right.
and influencing everything in that way. And even if you do, again, generally speaking, but the dynamics are not generally set up that like those people are then going to be like, oh, I guess we were wrong and we're going to change everything now.
Yeah.
Like in part because diagnosis is not this thing that everyone thinks it is. And so legitimately someone can like, here's a common critique of like increasing autism diagnoses, ADHD, other things as well, is that sometimes people point out like, oh, seems like everybody's autistic or has ADHD these days or whatever. And certainly diagnosis rates are climbing like rapidly. And one of the critiques then is like, yeah, you just go and find somebody and pay them $4,000 and they're like, yep, your kid's autistic and needs special treatment in school. That's a common criticism of how all this is going. And there's truth to that one. There are people that, I'll say this. I assume that there are people who legitimately you pay them 100%, you're going to get whatever diagnosis you want. But that's not what I'm talking about. I'm just saying that things are structured in such a way that if you go through the process of getting private, psych evaluations or whatever, you're much more likely to end up with the diagnosis that you're expecting than otherwise. I want to talk about all this, but there's just so much
I do too, though. I want to talk about the diagnoses and how, I don't know, just not even just with autism, but just in general, the diagnosis and not diagnosis, testing, I guess.
So,
and I know.
I would say I don't think this is, as far as I'm aware, this is not part of like the official record or whatever. But I would say that the reason that there is a diagnostic criteria for autism spectrum disorder, that those things have to have been present prior to age 3, is because the diagnostic criteria is reverse engineered, meaning that like we're observing a pattern of experiences. Let's just for shorthand, we'll refer to like someone is behaving in the way that we would identify as being autistic. Then, like we said, we want to change that because what we're observing is primarily the downsides. We're not noticing the like upsides of that. So not just the parents or the people outside, but the person themselves, like, might very well want to change those things. Nobody's wrong for wanting to change that stuff. Obviously, there are cases in which the people outside of the person want to change things and the person themselves doesn't, and that's a different thing than what we're talking about. So then we speculate about why it's happening. And autism is, this isn't like a reach, right? Like autism is thought of as a biological disease. It is notably right now the person who is the most powerful person in the United States in regards to like the Secretary of Health and Human Services keeps saying that it is a neurobiological disease. He's literally calling it a disease. And even the people who are opposed to him generally don't oppose that part.
Right.
Like even the people who don't like what he's doing will also say, this is a serious neurological disease and we have to treat. And it isn't. And again, this is not a matter of stigma and this is not a matter of opinion. It does not meet the criteria of being a disease. It is not a disease. It is not a biological condition. There are 0 identified biomarkers. That's not to say that we might not be able to identify some correlations as time goes on. But as of right now, there are no biomarkers. There is no etiology, no pathophysiology. And so everyone's talking about it like it's a disease because that was what was useful, right? That effectively, let's take a specific example, because I want to be clear that there tends to be this divide between autistic individuals, what we would generally talk about as like autism advocates or activists, people who themselves identify as being autistic, versus what are often referred to as autism parents, where there's like the caregivers of people who are autistic. And those two groups, there's a lot of overlap, but there's also a lot of differences. And obviously those differences are meaningful and impactful, and that gets emphasized to the point that it's conceptualized as like one group against the other a lot of the time, which I think is unfortunate. because while I am sure that there are people, yes, there are people who are like acting in bad faith, and there are people even who are acting in good faith that are doing things which cause harm to others unintentionally or whatever. There's still like overlap in these experiences. So let's take a hypothetical, not a real person, but a specific example of you have a child, and then that child like doesn't start speaking when the other kids usually do, and you start to worry about that. But whatever, there's a window, whatever. But now a year has passed and they're still not speaking, and they're not responding when you call their name. They don't look at you or react to you in any way. And now another year has passed and they're 4 or 5 years old and they still don't speak, and they don't look at you or anybody else when you try to call their name or talk. Like, anybody in that position, of course, is going to be concerned.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with a person being like, whoa, this is not how it typically goes. And this is like suboptimal. This causes some problems here. So that part's fine. And then we want to do things about it. We don't know what to do. And that's where all this other stuff gets involved. And that's where calling it a disease or conceptualizing it as a disease can be very useful for people. Because otherwise, if I think like, no, this is just like, this is the way we as a culture think about, like, if a person's just behaving differently than we would want them to, or than would be best for them or whatever, or than they themselves would want, but they can behave in that way, then everything is focused on like, well, we got to make them do that.
Right.
And our culture focuses a lot on operant conditioning, where we reward and punish people to do those things and whatever. So that leads to a lot of like, not that everything it leads to is bad, but certainly it can and does lead to some bad stuff where people are beating people in order to try to get them to communicate or whatever. And when something like that happens, it's really useful, given the way that everyone thinks, to say, look, this is a disease. Stop doing that. Like, this isn't just something that they're choosing to do, which is true. That is accurate. The person's not just choosing to do it and doesn't have the capacity to just choose to do it differently. And I don't mean that in the sense of deficiency. All humans, there are some things we can just choose and it happens. And there are many, many things that we can choose it whatever we want. It doesn't change how it is. Our culture has conflated a person didn't choose this, and they don't have the ability to just choose for it to be different in the moment. We conflate that with it is a biological condition and nothing can be done about it.
Wow, that's a stretch.
Yeah. But again, like, makes sense, even in like LGBTQ plus communities where there's a, born this way, the concept of being born this way, same deal, right? Like, if we interpret that to mean I didn't consciously choose to be the way that I am, and I can't just choose to be different, completely agree, 100% valid. If we interpret that as like, I have some genes that made it so that I am this way, or it's a result of some physiological process, then we're just speculating about stuff. But being born this way understandably gets interpreted to mean both of those things. Same with autism or ADHD. I just have a different brain. Their brain is wired differently. My brain is wired differently. In a metaphorical sense, fine. A useful way to explain, like, I seem to process or respond to things differently than people generally do.
Yeah.
But we also interpret that as literally my brain is physically wired differently. That's not true.
Right.
So just these things get confused and conflated. So anyway, that if the purpose of thinking of it as a disease is to get someone from, how do I make it so the person, whether it's me, myself, or a child or whatever, shifting from how do I get them to be different, to how do I change things around them so that the way that they are works better, is generally like a good thing to do. And if that's accomplished, as it often is, by getting someone to just be like, that's how they are, that's how they're always going to, or this is how I am, this is how I'm always going to be, I need to focus on changing other things instead of myself. That's just there are unfortunate consequences later on down the line of everyone thinking of it as a disease.
Right.
But that's useful in the individual cases.
No.
Like, back to our hypothetical, if my kid, if we don't talk in the way that other people generally do, and that I've always talked with other people in my life, I still want to feel connected to him. I still want to I still love him and I want to interact with him. And so learning about, well, he communicates differently than others. He responds differently than others. And so I'm now interpreting things from him differently.
Mhm.
And that's great.
Right. But I feel like it's, I don't know, when you said that about having it be a disease, like people thinking like that, so then obviously they can't do anything to change them, so they're going to change the environment, which inherently, yes, is a good thing. But I feel like it's also just detrimental to the person who is diagnosed with that, like
It's-
knowing that, even though that's the truth, like it's like they lose like their own like. I
It's
don't know
not
if
that
knowledge
it's
is the right
the
word.
truth. It's
The
it
narrative.
is. It's a false dichotomy. That's the problem, right? The reality of it is for all humans, every single person, the way I like to say it is every experience that every person ever has is the result of an interaction between that person and the environment
Mhm.
in which they are, in which that experience is happening. They're like, it just cannot be broken down into like, well, this is happening because of something about me versus this is happening because of something about how stuff around me is, other people or things in the environment or whatever. That's just not how it works. But that's also really, really complicated. And so when we're trying to like change something, which all of us are trying to do all the time, like I want to start cooking or whatever, then we look at like, okay, do I try and change something in me or do I try and change something in the environment? And there are reasons that it's worth doing one or the other, but a lot of that has to do with the cost and the value, and that's complicated. And so people mostly sum it up and simplify it as like, well, some things are about you, some things are about the environment.
Right.
And shifting it when I'm doing stuff that isn't working and it's making stuff worse and whatever, hurting myself or others because I'm trying to change the environment, shifting it to no, it's about the person can be really helpful and important. But it's a false dichotomy. It's not that it's one or the other.
Right.
And that's what you're talking about is there's a downside to saying, no, it's about the person and like in some unchangeable way that nothing we can do around them or whatever changes anything, like locks somebody into a position that they can't change then.
I mean, is there a way to not like, what was the word dichotomy? What was the first?
False dichotomy. That it isn't like either this or that.
Is that, I don't know, I guess, is there a different way to look at it where it's not just like constantly going through the cost and the value? Like, what do you, I don't know what I'm trying to say. Like, what would be a better way of looking at it that isn't, it's not one or two things, or it's not one thing, it's both. I feel like that's
complexity, nuance, but we can't do that. Nobody, not me, not anybody, because we have finite resources. You can't do that with everything. The most helpful thing is when, like I say it this way, that the simplest answer that works is the best one, meaning you don't need to understand the complexity and nuance of stuff as long as stuff is working the way that you're wanting it to work. If and when it doesn't, that's when it's now worth like, okay, let me understand that there's more complexity. And this is where we focus a lot on being wrong and knowing that you're wrong about things. Because what happens is if I think that this is how something's supposed to work and it doesn't work that way, there's two possibilities here. Either I think that my understanding of how things are supposed to work is accurate and therefore something is going wrong. Or I think my understanding was inaccurate. Depending on which of those I think is different things. If I think the way I think about it is correct, then I don't try to learn a new thing or correct or add complexity. I just try to force it to go the way that it's supposed to, or I give up on it, or whatever. Whereas and so the better way, yes, is to, it didn't work the way I thought it was going to, or the way I expected. There's got to be some stuff here that I don't understand. Let me try and be more open or get more information or whatever. Because on a cultural level, let's use depression instead of autism. On a cultural level, by and large, way better to go from, oh, people aren't depressed, they're just making a big deal out of nothing, or they're just moping and they just need to snap out of it and like stop being whiners, whatever. That sucks. Going from that to, no, this is not something that they want or enjoy or benefit from. It's just something that's happening to them. They didn't choose it and they can't just choose to be different. They're not doing it on purpose. Way better. But then locking that in is like, it is a disease, it's a chemical imbalance or a brain that is structured differently or whatever. Well, then, as you pointed out, but the whole point of what we're talking about is that it sucks to be depressed, right? The depressed individual, what we're saying is like, they don't like that. They're not doing it on purpose. it sucks, they don't want it. Well, how do we then change it
Right.
if it's purely like the way that your brain is wired? The only thing is some kind of medical or biological intervention, and so we use medication,
Right.
which is great.
I feel like though, and I think this is, maybe I'm repeating what I'm just saying, but using that example of depression, I feel like makes me think even more like if someone is told like this is just how you are, whatever, why would they even want to try to make things better?
Yeah, they often don't, or at least not through any way that isn't the prescribed
Right. That's what I
way,
meant.
right?
Yeah.
Like, if this is about the chemicals in my brain, then the only thing I'm going to do to try and change my experience is about managing what chemicals are in my brain.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, we do then have some stuff that I personally think of as funny, but in like a tragic way,
Okay.
where like we then sometimes circle back around to like, here's some stuff you can try or that you can do or whatever that might help. But now we phrase it as like, if you do this, you might have more dopamine. If you do this, you might have more serotonin or whatever, which a lot of that stuff is not fundamentally different than advice or things that have worked or been suggested for a long time. But now it's like, oh no, it's chemicals. And yes, it does remove people's agency, right? Like, and as we talked about, it's not one-to-one, but experiences come closer to expectations.
Mm-hmm.
You're expecting something to suck. It's more likely that your experience of it will suck than if you're expecting it to be good.
Right.
And yeah, if you expect that, look, I'm a person that I feel depressed for no reason, just biological, there's nothing I can do about it, then you expect that.
Yeah.
And you notice it when it happens, and when things make you sad, you're more, if I believe that I'm a person who gets really sad, because at the root of, when we're saying depressed, that's the clinical term, but the primary thing there is sadness, a very intense and frequent sadness. If I'm a person that believes that for biological reasons, I get sad in ways that have nothing to do with the environment, well, then if something sad happens and I get sad in response to it, again, not one-to-one, but it's more likely that I'm going to be like, well, that's fine. I'm just getting sad because that's what I do.
Right.
And not worry about whether the thing that's making me sad is worth being sad about.
Yeah.
It's better than what came before, but it does have these unfortunate consequences of then like getting a person to dismiss their own experience as being disproportionate to reality. I'm sad in ways that I shouldn't be.
Right.
Whether it's autism or ADHD or any of these disorders, fundamentally what we're saying here is I am thinking or feeling or behaving in ways that I shouldn't based on the context. That like how I should think or feel or behave is this. Mine is different because of whatever disorder.
Right.
It's all deficit model stuff. Again, I know this is complicated and people really can't like process me saying it, but that's not necessarily bad. That is, in many cases, very good and very useful to think of it that way.
What way?
Thinking of it as a disease or as know, my thoughts or feelings or actions are disproportionate to what. It's just not as simple as everyone wants it to be, that there's a good way to think or feel or act and all other ways are bad. Life is way more complicated than that. And like, fine, I can sit here and say that in this abstract way as we're having this like hypothetical conversation. And that doesn't help the individual who's like 5-year-old child doesn't communicate verbally.
Right.
It doesn't help that 5-year-old child who doesn't communicate verbally in a world in which like that is going to seriously impede their ability to get the things from other people and from the environment that they would want or that would benefit them. It doesn't benefit the person having a panic attack to say like, well, you know, this isn't about a biological whatever.
Yeah.
Actually, in that last case, sometimes it does benefit that person because a lot of time panic attacks do result from a person believing that they are a person who biologically will have them, and then they start to stress about whether they'll have one, and then that becomes one.
Right.
But yeah, no, I'm not saying like, so therefore everyone should just shut up and everything's fine. Like obviously, you, all of us have experiences that we want to be different. I'm saying that the more effective way to change things is to deal with it as being nuanced and complicated beyond our ability to just simply understand.
Right.
You want to simplify it, that's fine, because as long as it works, fine.
Yeah.
But if it doesn't, then maintaining that simple understanding that an autistic person just lacks empathy or whatever is not going to help you, and it's not going to help anybody else that you're trying to help either. So, but people would rather think that the way they understand it is the correct way,
Right.
even though it's not. The mind would rather be dead than wrong.
When talking about like, oh man, I was looking at the time. I thought we had more time. Like accepting that like it's nuanced and complex. I feel like it's if you can accept that and know that, that's one other thing to put it into practice. I feel like a lot of people just want to be like, yeah, there's a lot of complexities and there's all these different things, but I don't have the time, I don't have the energy to look at all of that. So let me still just pick a simple answer that is going to make sense.
Yeah, that's why the mindset that's going to work out best for people, again, in general, is to know that you don't know stuff. That like the information you have, the information I have, the understandings I have, the ways in which I act are all built around what works and what doesn't work, like what happens. I do things, I know things, I think things, whatever, in ways that have emerged over the course of my life because it's helped me. It's made it so that I can have outcomes that I prefer over ones that I don't.
Yeah.
That is not the same as it is correct or right. And that's fine, because it's not possible to be correct or right, and it's not even worth trying. That's the point you're making. Like, we can't understand everything. Yeah, we can't. The fact that understanding itself, that we can't understand everything, the fact that causes people distress, is what I'm talking about.
Well, no, I don't think that's what I'm trying to say. I'm not trying to say that the complexity meaning like, oh, like we're never going to know everything, but I mean knowing that there's more than just one way of looking at it. I feel like just thought of even wanting to think about another thing is stressful.
Yeah, like a new way of thinking about it.
Yeah.
I think the stress that comes up for people in response to that is a stress that's mostly built around.
Oh, but you were saying, sorry, I was getting hooked on like when you said like, oh, like they're being stressed about knowing that they don't know everything, but that's not what I'm saying.
I understand, but I'm saying that I think that that's the narrative that plays into it. So meaning like, let's pretend that there is some, like literally in this metaphor, there is a switch inside every person, or a dial, 0 to 100, right? And if it's all the way at 100, you are a person who is right about, like, anytime you think you're right about something, you are. And if it's at 0, you're never, every time you think you're right about something, you are not. You're never right about it. Let's pretend that dial exists and that each person has inside of them that dial is set to a certain number. And there's no way to change it. And there's no way to observe it directly and look and see what the number is set at, right? If that was true, then it would become really, really important for me to track, like, of all the times that I think that I'm right, how often does it turn out that I was wrong? Because if I was right, if I thought I was right 10 times and learned I was wrong each of those times, then that might mean that my dial is at like 0 or down low. And if that's the case, then I can never trust any of my thoughts that I have about anything ever. Whereas if every time I've thought I'm right, turns out that I was, then that dial's up by 100 and I can trust my thoughts moving forward. That's the belief that people have in our culture. Call it intelligence or whatever. But that's what people are doing, is like, every time it turns out I'm wrong, I don't want to be wrong, because if I am, then it doesn't mean that my dial turned lower. It means like, oh man, my dial might be set lower than I thought it was. And I will be wrong about everything forever, which of course is true. So it's a hard fear to placate everybody. I don't care how much somebody is identified by everyone around them as being like really intelligent or whatever. Everybody's wandering around, walking around being like, oh man, what don't I know? Like, obviously I'm missing stuff. Obviously I screw up. Like, what's wrong? What am I missing? So why we want to try to learn all this stuff in advance, because we know that we don't know stuff. The belief that that's doable, that I know I can't, but you know, there are people who just know all the stuff and don't mess up. Like, that's doable for humans. The belief that that's doable keeps me feeling terribly about something that doesn't warrant feeling terrible. Like, sure, being able to get information or ideas or skills in advance of a problem happening is such that you prevent that problem from happening is great. Obviously, in practice, the whole point of that is that you never know.
Right.
No matter what you learn, like if you learn to do something in a certain way that makes it so that there's this problem that would otherwise have happened
Mhm.
but doesn't now, the whole point is that that problem never happens. So you'll never know, did that problem not happen because of what I'm
Right.
doing, or did it just not happen because it wasn't going to happen for other reasons? And even if you were to be able to know, you still just, what are you going to do randomly in the day? Be like, I bet this is a time that that problem would have happened had I not known. Like,
Maybe. No.
like you're just not going to think about it.
Yeah, that's true.
We just notice when the problems happen, and that is how it's meant to be. We are, like all living things, we are reactive. Humans are better than anything else,
Mhm.
literally in the known universe. We're better than anything else at predicting and preparing to make it so that either a coming problem doesn't happen,
Mhm.
or that if and when it does, we're prepared to resolve it much more easily than we would have if we hadn't prepared for it.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean everything. There's very, very few and little that we can do.
Right.
But because we know we can do that, every time a problem happens, somebody's like, dang it, if only I had thought about this in advance or
Mhm.
understood this in advance, it wouldn't have happened. And that is where it's just not worth, doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It's happened now. Whether you could have theoretically done something different, that only matters insofar as it lets you do something that prevents it from happening again.
Mhm.
Sometimes it's a problem that like is going to happen again
Mhm.
unless I change.
Right.
My car broke down because I didn't add oil or do an oil change.
Mhm.
Now I learned that and I do an oil change.
Mhm.
Other times, though, whatever you understand or do is not likely to change it in the future. So you're just playing this game that you don't know or think of as a game. Hell, a lot of what we talk about culturally and in like therapy, so when we talk about trauma,
Mhm.
a huge amount, the majority of that stuff that we're talking about is that, where it's like something happened
Mhm.
and you're trying to take a lesson from it, your
Yeah.
body or your processes, whatever, some part of you as an individual is trying to take a lesson from it of what can I do to make sure
Mhm.
it doesn't happen again. But the thing is not something you can really prevent from happening again, or at least not by doing the responses that you're doing.
Right.
You know, like that hypervigilance that whenever you hear music isn't likely to stop whatever happened
Mhm.
that one time that there was music playing. So that's also fine. It's just, we're problem solvers. That's
Yeah.
what we do. Like when a problem happens, it's not an indication that your dial is closer to zero than you thought it was and that you're a person who will just always fail and have
Mhm.
problems. It's just how life is. We can't know everything.
Yeah.
Problem happens, then you resolve it. There is no dial.
Yeah, that's true.
If you know that, then you don't treat like ratio of success to failure as meaningful. It doesn't
Mhm.
matter. Only if I think there's a dial, then it's like, well, I'm right 7 times out of 10 is a big difference than
Mhm.
I'm right 4 times out of 10.
Right.
But if it's like, nah, sometimes I'm right, sometimes I'm wrong, and the reasons why are specific to those specific
Mhm.
circumstances, not because of some internal characteristic. Anyway,
I know I got lost in the trance. I want to keep talking, but I know we have to wrap up.
me too. Sorry, you were going to say something. Did you want to say whatever you were going to say?
Oh, I don't know what else.
Oh, you sound.
I don't remember.
Doesn't matter.
I'll bring it up next time if I do, but it was good to be with everyone, and I look forward to seeing you all next week.
Yeah, good to be with you all. See you next
Bye.
week.